When we talk about making a huge life change, especially something like recovery, we tend to focus on all the external things, the programs, the treatments, the resources. But what if the most important step isn't something you can sign up for? What if it's a quiet, internal shift that has to happen first?
I mean, think about it. When the conversation turns to recovery, our brains immediately go to all the practical stuff, don't they? We think about treatment centers, support groups, different kinds of therapy, and don't get me wrong, all of that is absolutely crucial. But let's ask this. What if the real starting point isn't a program or a plan, but something that happens inside? A quiet moment where, for the first time, a little bit of possibility starts to creep in. That, right there, is where we find the hidden power of hope. Now, hope, it's not just some vague feel-good emotion. Thanks to some really fascinating psychological research, we can actually break it down and understand it as a way of thinking. So let's get into the anatomy of hope. Okay, so there's this psychologist, C.R. Snyder, who developed what we now call hope theory. And what's so brilliant about it is that it completely reframes hope. It's not passive, it's not wishful thinking. He saw it as an active, structured way our minds work. It's something we do to help us move toward our goals. So according to Snyder, this whole process has three key parts that have to work together. First up, you need belief, just a genuine, even tiny feeling that you can take a step forward. Then you need a pathway, a sense that there's actually a route you can take. And finally, you need agency, that feeling that you have some power to act, that the world isn't just a wall of roadblocks. You need all three for that spark of hope to really catch fire. All right, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in the real world? How does this idea go from being an abstract concept to a real force for change? Well, let's look at what happens when someone finally takes that very first step. Just picture this for a second. Someone is about to walk into their very first support meeting. I mean, they're probably terrified, full of doubt, and just feeling completely overwhelmed. But for them to have even made it to that door, all three parts of hope had to be working even just a little. They had to believe they could do it, see that meeting as a possible path, and feel enough personal agency to actually turn the doorknob. And this is exactly why visible recovery is such a game changer. When somebody who's struggling hears real stories from people who've actually been where they are, well, that creates the pathway. That's the missing piece. Suddenly, this impossible journey seems possible. They can see a way forward because they're looking at people who have already walked it. And this is where the magic really happens. That single action, just walking through the door, becomes a tiny piece of evidence. It starts this amazing positive feedback loop. Hope fuels that first step. And then that first step becomes proof that strengthens the belief, which makes the next step just a little bit easier. It builds and builds on itself. So this all leads us to a really important new way to think about what hope's role really is in all of this. It's not about keeping score. It's about getting the fire started. And here's the bottom line, really. Hope is not a KPI. It is not a key performance indicator. It's not some business metric you can track on a spreadsheet. When we try to quantify hope, we miss the entire point. Its value isn't in being measured, it's in what it makes possible in the first place. Hope is the spark. It's that initial flicker you need to get the whole engine of change to turn over. Without that little spark, all the best laid plans and all the resources in the world might just sit there, completely unused. It is the absolute prerequisite for taking that first terrifying step. And that leaves all of us with a final question to really chew on. If hope is that essential spark, and if seeing others succeed helps create the pathways, then the real question for all of us is, where in our own lives can we create more of those sparks of hope for the people around us?